Welcome, everybody. It is yep Thursday night, and this is Attack on the Politicos. It is the NGSC Sports weekly political show. I am your host, Ralph Garcia, joined by my two co-hosts. First, we go to Florida, to the ladies' room, figuratively speaking, and say hi, Lori.
Hi, Ralph. How are you this evening? Hey, Glenn.
Hello.
Lori.
What?
There you go. Come on.
I'm here.
Play with
I'm
my
talking.
emotions, Lori.
I'm talking.
How
You
I
can't
get.
hear me? Oh, God. Here we go.
And then of course, and yes, we hear you. And the great state of Connecticut, the coach. What's up, coach?
Not much.
That's a lie, but that's
Quite a
good
bit.
that you
This is
say
quite a
that.
bit.
It's a lie, but it's good that you say that. Remember the website, of course. It is NGSCSports.com, where you catch all of your current sports content. I want to thank those who have already joined us on Twitter. I will not call it X. Remember, you got comments, you got opinions, you want to talk shit. It's okay. We don't care, right, left. We're not here to attack you. You say something stupid now. Hey, I'm doing a show. I didn't invite you guys. You're not a guest. So you say something stupid and we jump in your ass. Now that's a different story. We can't help that. You know that stupid things get stupid prizes. Anyway, please remember the website if you log on to the website right now. By the way, John, my partner John, will be making the trip right now. He's telling me he hopes he feels like it. He doesn't have a choice. We've been covering, of course, the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, Massachusetts for years and years now, many years. And the UMass Lowell Riverhawk men's basketball team travels to Burlington, Vermont. 3-hour drive for John as they head to Burlington to take on the Vermont Catamounts. The winner will be called the America East men's basketball champion and earn an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. So I'm not looking forward to it. I understand how he feels. When I had to cover Memphis and drive to Memphis, I didn't want to drive to Memphis. Worse than that, I knew I had to drive back. But
Hey, when I coached at Eastern, we had to play the Catamounts up in Vermont, and it was like a 6-hour bus ride. All right, it was ridiculous. So I feel for that ride, but I don't have no sympathy.
No, that's a rough one. That's a rough one. If you log on to the website right now, you'll see that. Let's see. John Doucette gives us the America East baseball news and notes. A good week for the league. Semi Sportface under enormous pressure. Wake advances in NCAA tournament, but they lost today to Pitt, so Wake has been eliminated. Boston College to play the 12th annual ALS awareness game at Fenway Park in memory of Pete Freites, died of ALS. God rest his soul. All that and more, of course, on NGSCSports.com, where we never stop. We're going to go in a different direction tonight. Before we do, just a few news tidbits. Judge Aileen Cannon has dismissed Judge Trump's ridiculous request of throwing out the documents case. She's like, no. They're trying to say that there's no merit to the charges. Okay. There's also, we're waiting for news on the decision of Fani Willis. Will she be removed as the prosecutor in the Fulton County case? So we're waiting for that. I'm trying to pay attention to see if that goes down. So we will check on all of that. But that is going on right now. Of course, we continue with Israel and Gaza, Benjamin Netanyahu. People get something straight. Netanyahu doesn't want a ceasefire. You don't want no peace. He wants to eliminate. If it was up to him, he'd drop one or two and take care of the 1.5 to 2 million people that are in a little piece of that strip trying to stay alive. He doesn't care that they're starving. He wants to level the place and get rid of all the Palestinians. And Hamas is not interested in. Hamas isn't about peace. Hamas wasn't made for peace. It wasn't born for peace. So come on, let's be for real. All that and more, of course, on NGSCSports.com, where we never stop. We started on a good topic. Coach came up with the agenda. Came up with a great agenda. Hey, I got to keep my dogs in check here. By the way, let me get over here and tell you guys that first, of course, a moment as we introduce the show. I'm getting forgetful at my age.
There is such a thing as security that's needed anyway. So I think there's a way we can work through this.
Trade can be wonderful if you have smart people, but we have people that are stupid.
This is your victory. I know you didn't do this just to win an election. I know you didn't do it for me. You did it because you understand the enormity of the task that lies ahead.
The enormity of the task that lies ahead, said by Barack Obama. Wow. It seems like a lifetime ago. And here we are on the precipice of the 2024 elections, general elections, including, of course, the presidential election here in the United States. And wow, what a time in America. What an election this is about to be. And it's as if no matter who wins, we all lose. And if Trump wins, we're all fucked. So it's a no-win situation. But what do you think of when you think of the Steele dossier? The coach is going to go into this in a minute. I'm going to lead you in this way, Coach. You said a couple of things which was very interesting, because one of the first things that you always hear when it comes to the Steele dossier was, the Democrats and the Russian collusion bullshit. First and foremost, collusion is not a crime. Second of all, okay, Trump didn't collude with Russia. That was about almost 10 years ago. Can you please get the fuck over it now? Can we get over that? And don't say that nothing came of the Mueller report, because plenty came of the Mueller report. It didn't hit Trump. So his followers and his worshipers, of course, that's all they care about. But it hit home to a whole lot of others. But then the Steele dossier comes. The origins, the confusion of the origins. Why the Steele dossier? Hillary Clinton and the DNC funding the I mean, you know what? So the coach has been doing some homework. And one of the things that I found, really fascinating, Coach, you talked about Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, the U.S. economy, the amount of money in the economy, the amount of money they control, the percentage of the economy, basically all the money that they control. And I'm going to lead the coach in with this because he's going to break it down for us. People, let's get something straight right here, okay? The wealthy elite, I didn't say the wealthy and the elite, because the wealthy is the elite, and I mean the very wealthy, very elite. They don't give a fuck about none of us. They want to own it all, run it all, have it all, and don't give a shit. They don't give it doesn't matter what political party they are, because they don't give a shit what political party you are. They only care about their control. And Coach, this was so fascinating, the numbers that you came up with. Because I started reading that shit, and I had to read it again and say, hold on a second.
Yeah.
There's this much money in America, and these three guys hold 75% of it. You said, Coach, tell us. This is crazy.
You know, how it breaks down is when you're talking about the big three, if you will. You have Vanguard, you have BlackRock, and you have State Street. Now, like, State Street's the oldest, basically, index fund. All of these are fund managers. They manage funds for their investors and stuff. But State Street's been around since the 1700s. BlackRock has been around probably the last 30 years, something like that. And then you have Vanguard that's been around for about 70 years. The thing is that it goes overlooked because they are index fund managers, which means that basically they're made up of shareholders. But when you start looking deeper into it, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and that's where my nephew, my nephew, I love the kid. He's a right winger, and he has all this information about these investment firms and what they're up to. And he and I talked a number of times, and he's mentioned it, and I'm like, I really don't know much about it. I haven't paid any attention to it and stuff. And he's like, oh, you really should. So I decided, what? I probably really should. I probably really should look into this and find out, what the hell they're talking about. So the real quick gist of it is this, globally speaking, and this goes beyond America, Ralph, this is globally speaking. There's about $85 trillion in circulation of money on the planet. Okay. Now there's other wealth. There's other types of wealth, but in terms of circulating money, there's about $85 trillion. Right now you have Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock. On the marketplace, they control about $35 trillion. But what was interesting in doing that information was that you find that State Street, which again has been around since the 1700s, actually controls an additional $40 trillion in deposits. And so when you add that up and you look at it's about $61 trillion that those three organizations are in control of. And when you have $85 trillion and 60 trillion of them are controlled by three organizations, that's 3/4 of the world's money. And what's even more alarming is that these three are invested in each other. So it's not like they're three competing organizations for anything. They actually are invested in each other. So how it breaks down with them is that, like the Fortune 500, everybody's heard of the Fortune 500, right? The top companies in the world, Microsoft, Google, Walmart, all these. Well, these three organizations own these companies by way of shareholding. So you're looking at, Walmart makes $100 and something billion a year, Microsoft, $100 and something billion, and these hundreds of billions of dollars in all these organizations, that's great for their organization. Microsoft makes a tremendous amount of money. But ultimately, they're owned stock-wise by these three index funds. They have made such an impact globally, that they kind of control every aspect of your life, whether you understand it or not. So one of the things that I came across in doing the research on these three organizations was the real estate, because that's one thing that's been driving inflation. I don't know if people really follow what's been driving inflation here in America, but it's been the real estate market. It's always about housing. And this is the problem. Housing inflation is far worse than any other inflation going on, whether it's cost of goods and services, whatever. Real estate is the problem. They own somewhere in the range of 15 to 20% of the properties in America. That's commercial property, residential property, things like that. And it's actually worse than that. It's actually more than that when you look into their investments. Now, so it's not just purely property that they own. They own real estate investment programs that own other things like single family houses, mortgages, and stuff like that. So when you're looking at why inflation has been driven up so much, it's because these guys know that the more they purchase, they control now the supply chain of real estate. I think I saw an article in about New Jersey. I know, Laura, you're from New Jersey, right? Originally?
Yes.
They own like 30% of the property available in New Jersey. Like that, just with one state alone, 30% is owned by.
Okay. There's a question for you on that. when you're saying 30% of the property, are you talking about 30% of property that's been developed or not developed? Because New Jersey supposedly has moratoriums on future building that was established back, when McGreedy or whatever, McGreevy, when he was governor. You're not supposed to be developing unless you get okays through the state. So is it property that is already developed?
Yeah. Yeah. From what I've understood is that the for example, BlackRock is one of the big ones, okay, that owns a lot of property. And of course, the other two are invested in BlackRock, so they benefit from this. But BlackRock, if you go to their website, they have a denial out there about what they are invested in when it comes to real estate. But the denial is very suspicious. The denial is that they don't invest in single family homes. Okay. They have invested in commercial properties, and I'm going to assume that are developed, that are, you have, whether it's office buildings or some other kind of warehousing or whatever, they invest in that, and they invest in multifamily housing, which is why rents in America have skyrocketed over the last 3 years or so, because they control a tremendous amount of rental multifamily housing. So do they own properties that aren't developed? I don't think so. I think that they wait for the development to occur, because that's where the money's at, is under the development aspect, that the value goes up because there's a structure there, whether it's a warehouse or multifamily home or some kind of office building. But the goal is for these three groups is to control the pricing of these things, because they can drive up the prices of rent, for example, and which is what they've done in the last 3 years. If people haven't paid attention, I'm sure they have, that rent has almost doubled in a lot of places.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
And this is not inflation. This is not because of inflation. There's no inflation on running your home.
No.
When you're a landlord, right? What kind of liabilities do you have against you? You have the cost of your insurance. You have your taxes. If you have a property that you share, or you include the utilities and stuff, you might have a utility bill. But there's no real true need for inflation to drive things up. It's different for manufacturing, where the cost of manufacturing, the cost of transportation of the goods that you created, these things all play into a fact that, you got to ask a little more money to maintain your profit margin and stuff like that. Real estate's entirely different. Real estate is a speculation market. It's like, how much can I get from my home? And right now, I mean, it's insane what some houses are costing, for no reason at all, other than the fact that we're finding out that there's a push, a global push by these industries, these three, of course, main investment programs, to control the costs of rent and the cost of buying a new home. You can't even buy a new home, unless you have $500,000 right now. You're not going to buy a decent home for less than that,
Well, what's interesting too, when you're talking about this, first of all, Florida housing market is anticipated to really crash because of what's happening with our insurance down here. It's out of control. And of course, a lot of that's political. But I know that a lot of developments that were going up, not right where I am, but through the course of the state, that they were saying that a lot of these places, that developments are going to be rental developments. And a majority of developments you've ever seen go up are for sale, but it is what you said is backing what's happening around the state here. And it's actually making it more difficult for even first-time home buyers in the market, because I have heard that these corporations are coming in and, taking up new homes, taking up old homes, development, at least where I am locally.
The thing is, you have to look at it this way, right? And it's true even on single family homes. Okay, a lot of companies have bought up single family homes in very nice neighborhoods, and what's the end goal for them is rent, right? So Here's why they want to buy up these properties and put them out for rent, because A, they collect money on the rent, which is profit, but B, they get to maintain the asset, which will grow over time in value. So if they buy a house for $250,000 today, they're able to rent it out for twice what the mortgage cost on it, say, for example, what an individual would have for a mortgage on it. They're making this in pure profit, and the value of that home is increasing their portfolio because the value over that home goes up over the years, you know? And so that's where they're at. The funny thing is, Lori, okay, this is what's crazy about this fucking group. I mean, it goes really deep and ugly. You're right about the cost of homes and the problem in Florida with the insurance companies. But do you know who owns the insurance companies? Vanguard, BlackRock, and
Oh,
State
Lord.
Yeah.
They own the insurance companies.
Yeah.
So they don't give a fuck if the insurance goes crazy and you have to pay a tremendous amount of, and now you can't afford to own your own home. Now you got to find a rental somewhere. They don't give a shit because they control all of that.
And not
The
only
thing, the sad part about it all is that, and I've thought about this many times over, the average person is not going to ever be able to afford to live in Florida. I don't know. You see how they're exiting California? Well, that's going to be happening in Florida because I know so many people who they can't afford the insurance. They can't afford our utilities are going crazy. They just can't afford to live here anymore. So you're going to control the state with who can actually afford to live here. How is their property going to keep going up? What is this just going to be for rich people only? And the rich people want to own. They don't want to rent.
Listen, go ahead, Ralph. Sorry.
I want you to add this in too. Listen, these guys are so successful and so smart. They've got their money invested on both sides of the coin. Okay, even in war, when it comes to war and trade, all of this, they've got their hands dipped on both sides. They've got it covered from each side. They're making money from everywhere, hand over fist, coach.
That's exactly right. And that's the point, Lori, right? Because one of the things that was crazy, and I've talked about this in previous shows, but not about this topic. My daughter was looking to buy a house this past year. So her and her fiance were looking at homes, and the market was just really high. And we thought that this was just a trend and it was going to come back down. But it didn't come back down. It's still really high. But yet people are still buying homes. And it's like, where is this happening? How is people still buying these homes? You know why? Because there are rich people in the world, Lori. You know, they don't have to be the uber rich, but they're the kind of rich that they can afford a $400,000 house with the mortgage that comes with it. You know, so they're trying to guide the home ownership into the wealthy people's opportunities and force the common man into rentals, so they own nothing at the end of the day, given their investment. So you can pay a rent for the rest of your life and never own any piece of property with any equity value or anything like that. And what do you become? You become a rental slave to this process. So yes, there's a lot of wealthy people out there that are buying up the homes and forcing those that are less fortunate financially to have to settle for paying, you know, $2,000 a month for a rental versus $2,800 a month for a mortgage, and then, you know, taxes and insurance on top of that. So this is their game. This is a game that they've been playing. The market research on this is incredible, what they've put into this understanding of how to manipulate the market. This is not something they take lightly, and no matter what it is. Like Ralph mentioned, they have the hands on both sides. Okay, this is a situation where they make money off the defense budget. One of the questions I posed to my nephew was like, you know, because he's telling me they're invested in Ukraine and invested in Russia, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? I mean, you got two polar opposites. You know, you would think you'd pick a side, but no, they don't pick a side because they know that both sides need things. So if you need, you know, different types of defense issues, whether it's, you know, guns or missiles or whatever, they're invested in that. They have a high stake in the $1 trillion a year that comes out of the defense budget. They are heavily invested in American defense budget. And we're the ones supplying the world with defense items. So we're making tons of money there. But they also invest in other things like, the Band-Aids, the medical supplies, the pharmaceuticals, all these other things.
Equipment, all kinds of shit.
Right. Exactly. And that's the game they've played. They've diversified themselves so much that they can take a loss over here if it's not doing well, but over here it's doing so well that it offsets that loss, so it's minuscule. You're talking about controlling $60 trillion. Okay, $60 trillion is unimaginable. I don't even know how people can possibly wrap their head around 60 trillion. It's just a fucking word to us. Okay.
Can I ask when did this trend begin?
The trend began, probably around the mid 80s or maybe the early 80s.
Early
the trend
80s.
began, when see, again, State Street's been around for many years, okay? And that's been an investment program since the 1700s, which is why they actually control almost $50 trillion, in the world market. BlackRock came out in the mid 80s. And Vanguard came out probably in the early 30s, in response to the Great Depression, right? So Vanguard, for example, is this investor, this guy Bogle, who created this what they call the index fund, right? And his plan was always, and he taught this, was always long-term investment programs. Get involved and don't try to get rich quick kind of scheme. Don't invest your money and pull out as soon as you make a little bit of profit, and stay in for the long term. So their growth potential has just been exorbitant over the years. And then when you start into the 80s, where Ronald Reagan, freed up trillions of dollars in tax money to the rich, money started flowing tremendously into these index funds. And the whole buyback of stocks, the whole idea of shareholders. Shareholders is a fucking name that they give to make it sound like, your mom who has a 401k is a shareholder. That's obscene. It's completely obscene. They have stocks, okay? But a shareholder is somebody that owns millions upon millions of stocks in that company and makes, $1 billion a year in their net portfolio because of that. So this has been going on in terms of money since Ronald Reagan freed up the money to flow upwards rather than what used to be a balance. Remember, back in the day, when Ronald Reagan took over, the corporate tax rate was 70%, okay? And the whole idea of a high corporate tax rate was to encourage corporations to reinvest their money into the economy, whether it's building more facilities, whether it's hiring more employees, expanding their operations. This kind of stuff was all incentives. Ronald Reagan did away with that and dropped the tax rate to like 21%. And it just allowed this amount of wealth. We had I want to say in 1980, there were six billionaires in America. Okay. As of yesterday, there's over 1,000. Okay. This is all done by freeing up taxpayer money for these people to have a fucking money grab.
And it's been done by building this wealth through these decades. Little by little, as this started, it's gotten to this point right here. You check out Project 2025, portions of Project 2025, this fits right into that. By the way, Coach, how many trillion did you say is a lot of money?
How many trillion is a lot of money?
You just said you can't imagine how much. What did you say? 50?
Well, $60 trillion is what these three organizations control.
Hold on. So you take $100 million, right? Now, if somebody handed either one of us $100 million, I mean, holy crap, we're set. We're done. That's it. I'm good. I got $100 million. I'll coach you. Somebody gave you $100 million. You want $100 million. You good. Your family's good.
Yeah.
$100 million 10 times is $1 billion. And then $1 billion 10 times is $10 billion. And you got to keep repeating that.
It's 1,000 billion.
You have to keep repeating that till you get to $1 trillion. And that's a long process between a billion and $1 trillion. And then when you get to the trillion, for each trillion, you're going to repeat that 60 times. That's a lot of fucking money, man.
It's
that is a lot.
60,000 billion. $60,000 billion.
Billions. 60,000 billions.
It's crazy.
That's
crazy.
All right, listen, we're talking about money, right? And it's something that you bring that up because Coach's next topic was dark money, helpful or hurtful. I like the way you said a history of the mystery. What is dark money? So dark money in general, especially when it pertains to the world of politics, and in this case, politics here in the United States, it refers to money that's being spent to influence elections, policy, structure, laws, public discourse, anything that will help. And again, going along what we were just talking about with these three companies and those who control the wealth in the United States, dark money also does the same thing. Dark money, the more dark money you have, and this is undisclosed money, which is why it's dark money, it's undisclosed money. They say money can't buy you happiness. Well, okay, maybe money can't buy you happiness, but goddamn it, with money you can rule the world. Because when you start being able to have the ability to look at what we found out about, was it Alito and Thomas, and all that they've received throughout the years. I'm all for take what you can get. Hey, you find a rich friend, there are women and men who make it their sole purpose of living by finding a sugar mama or sugar daddy. More power to you. If that's what you do, that's what you do. And if the sugar mama and daddy don't mind, that I don't mind either. That's cool. But dark money has so much influence, has had so much influence in our way of life, Coach. And what it does now at this time with all the discord, man. And it's a great business. It's a great business.
it's for some people.
Yeah.
The idea of dark money, or let's say the history of dark money comes out of a lawsuit that occurred in 1976 called Buckley versus Vallejo. Okay. And the Supreme Court heard this case and came up with what they call the 8 magic words. Okay. So the argument had to do with, can companies invest money and be protected because they're paying for freedom of speech, their First Amendment rights. And so they came up with like 8 magic words that you have to include in terms of separating what is considered the dark money versus a political action committee, right? So dark money has nothing to do with political action committees, which are very popular nowadays. It's kind of like a special way for organizations to create a campaign fund to supply a candidate who is not in control of that fund necessarily, but you're supplying them with money for their campaign or paying for ads and stuff like that. And the Supreme Court ruled that's okay, that it's okay for organizations to do this because they as an entity exist and have the right to spend money on advocacy, if they will. That's one of the terms that is the 8 magic words. One of them is advocacy. The other one is special interest, lobbyist, if you want. So the dark money, the interesting about dark money, like in 2006, and it's exploded. That's the point here. Like between 1976 and 2006, okay? So we're talking 30 years, okay? The growth of that dark money went from 0 to $5 million a year. Okay, in 2006, there was $5 million spent from dark money. And as you said, dark money is exactly that. It's non-traceable funding. They don't have to disclose who the sources are of this money. But it's done by way of creating these nonprofit organizations that are acting on behalf of some agenda that they have as as a nonprofit organization. So they might be working on one angle of things, free the whales or whatever, and so they create these nonprofits. Is Lori there?
Damn it.
Create these nonprofits, and then therefore people can funnel money into there. Okay, so in 2006, we're talking about $5 million in dark money was involved in the elections, right? Now I have a note here, so I'm just going to read off of this. Okay, in 2012, $300 million was spent from dark money. Okay. So in a 6-year time, we went from 5 million to 300 million. In 2014, just in the midterms alone, $175 million in the midterms alone, just in the midterms, which are normally who gives a shit fucking voting, right? In 2020, over $1 billion in dark money was involved in the presidential election. Over $1 billion. And now we're up arguably almost $2 billion in dark money leading forward to 2024. And again, it's just the money and the funding is done in such a way, they've constructed it. And I mean they, meaning the Supreme Court and all the laws surrounding these nonprofits and stuff like that. They've constructed it in such a way that you can actually take your $1 billion, and there's one individual that gave $1 billion, okay, and divided it up amongst a number of different nonprofit organizations, right? So, and really, I'll say it this way: it really wasn't $1 billion. It was $1 billion in stock options he gave to these nonprofit organizations recently. And this is how they do it. They just divide it up. They invest in these programs, which eventually funnel the money to the candidate of their choice, whether it's through paying for advertising. They create their own ads. That's why nowadays you see when a presidential ad comes out or any kind of a political ad comes out, and I support this message, right? The individual that's being promoted, I support this message. That means it's coming from their campaign, that their campaign is paying for that message. And that's why they have to take credit for it, because otherwise it's coming from somewhere else. The money is coming from a backer of some sort into the election cycle. And that money is undetermined, unmeasurable, and completely untouchable.
Can I say something?
Oh, please, Lori.
First of all, I apologize for having to leave the show.
You look a whole lot better on camera. I love this picture. You look great when you came on camera.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, back to what I was going to ask.
Doesn't work, Coach.
See, you had to interrupt me, Ralph. Now my train of thought is gone. Keep talking. I'll get it back.
Well, I'll mention this then. With regards to the dark money, the thing is, sounds so terrible, right? The Democrats benefit more from dark money investment than.
Okay, that's it. That's it. That was my point. My point was, why would they want to put Trump in when the stock market is doing the best it's ever done, and it's under Biden, and he's got all these programs going when nothing was done other than giving them the wealthy tax breaks under Trump? Why would they want Trump back?
And here's why that I can't answer that. Why would they want Trump back? Because they don't. Okay, they don't want Trump back. All right. That's why they invest heavily in Democrats for two reasons that should be rather apparent. The first reason is, okay, Democrats spend taxpayer dollars on things like infrastructure. Okay, they want to do, military aid to Ukraine, for example. They wanted to spend, $118 billion, and $95 billion of it was going to be spent here in America. That's profit for these organizations like fucking BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and all these other people. This is profiting. Now, mind you, this is the thing, like Microsoft, right? Fucking Microsoft is a fucking multi-billion-dollar organization making billions, hundreds of $billions a year, right? Well, they're owned by somebody bigger than them. Microsoft doesn't stand on an island alone. They're owned by Vanguard. Or have a controlling interest in Microsoft. Google has these guys are controlling all these top 500 companies They're the ones that are. So the more profitable the Fortune 500 companies are, the more profitable it is for these big three and therefore for their shareholders. And that's the whole game. The other thing that Democrats are good at is running the economy. When you're talking about $1 trillion infrastructure bill, $1 trillion defense bill, this money is being funneled eventually back to these corporations that are benefiting from the investments part of it.
Right.
They're not necessarily building the rocket ship that goes to Mars, but they control the company that does build the rocket ship going to Mars. They're an investment firm that invests in winners. That's why they don't want they spent $500 million on the Democratic ticket in the last election, and only $200 million on the Republican side. You know, and
isn't it interesting how the RNC is going at this point? I mean, they've fired like dozens of their staffers, and all the money is supposed to be now streamlined towards Trump. So
that was the idea of getting those two in there. Listen, he's getting his people lined up. He's getting rid of those who are going to oppose him, even try to stop him at the door. And he's going to get those that are going to align with him and say, yes, sir.
You know why? I'll tell you why. Because Donald Trump runs this show, okay? He's the one that everybody bows down to, okay? Donald Trump, in terms of the worldview of these wealthy, controlling interest people, think he's a fucking moron, okay? No respect whatsoever for Donald Trump. They don't give a shit about him. But these people in America who are so fucking deluded into understanding global politics and global finance, they don't get it. They don't understand. Why do you think Republicans go out and rage against the spending? Oh, Democrats just want to spend. They just want to spend. They rage against it because spending stimulates the economy. If you spend $1 trillion on infrastructure, you have just put $1 trillion into the American economy. You didn't send it outside of the United States. You just hired people. You just provided people with opportunities for jobs. And on top of that, you just offered opportunities to profit by organizations and corporations that have to make sure these infrastructure programs go forward and are finished. So Donald Trump is small potatoes in the world of finance. He's a fucking moron. He's a con artist. He's a criminal. And they all know.
Loser too.
But
Number one, loser.
But as president, he can set policies and make moves that will advance the agenda of these fucking morons. And
I can steer that car right into the fucking Steele dossier because he's a fucking. What did do you guys remember when he debated Hillary and Hillary called him something? Do you remember what she called him? A puppet president for Putin.
Yeah.
And like people didn't really realize like she fucking knew a lot more than the American people about what was going on behind the scenes there. That's why Donald Trump is small potatoes, okay? Because he's a fucking yo-yo in the world of foreign affairs and foreign policy. He's a yo-yo. He's a complete moron. And that was one of the things that came out of the Steele dossier is that he's a fucking idiot.
It's just, but hey, listen, dark money rules it. It rules it, and believe me, remember, it just seems to be for the most part that a politician goes in with the right intentions, but it's like any of us as a human being. When that money starts to come in, or at least the money starts to get offered, and you get, one of these dark money people come up to you and say, hey, listen, I need a little hookup on a policy here. I need you to vote this way. We'll throw you a little change, man. They can throw you $10 million. Well, $10 million to them is a fucking dime to us. You know what I mean? It's a penny. It's nothing. But when you start getting this one on the left and this one at 10 million, 5 million, 20 million, it's like, what the fuck? All I have to do is.
All right, so here's a question.
Go ahead.
So we've got these three companies that are controlling all this money across the globe. All right. Then you got Putin, right? The quote richest man in the world, who would like to see Trump be installed. Now,
Yes.
where do the three companies stand on this issue then? I know they're not for anybody per se. They'll play both sides to the middle. I get that.
Yeah. The thing is about the three companies, again, they're index fund managers. If you want to talk about it in the sum of stock market or mutual funds, okay, there's no really one true shareholder that owns the companies. These are all companies that are owned by investor programs. And it goes back to what Ralph said earlier. It doesn't matter. I'll give you a great example, right? I don't know if you saw the movie Distinguished Gentleman with Eddie Murphy, right? But Eddie Murphy's sitting down with his advisor and they're like, well, how do you feel about sugar? And Eddie Murphy's like, well, how should I feel? He goes, it doesn't matter. If you love sugar, I'll get you money from the sugar industry. If you hate sugar, I'll get you money from the other industry that hates sugar. It doesn't fucking matter. And it doesn't matter to the big three. They don't give a fuck if you buy wheat or you buy fucking corn. They don't care. They're invested in both.
They got their hands in all that shit.
They're invested.
But I can't see them wanting to see democracy go down then, because that's where, I mean, the policies of the Democrats are the ones that are bringing the money to them, right?
I think that they're probably heavily invested in politics, and certainly a portion of whatever money is considered black money is invested by them. But they deal with things on a global scale. So, for example, okay, not only do they invest in Iran and provide Iran with resources and stuff like that, but they also invest in Israel. Okay, Israel is under attack by the Houthis, by Hamas, by the Lebanon group, the Hezbollah, all these radical terrorist cells that are sponsored by Iran, which is sponsored by the big three, but they also sponsor in Israel and pay for Israel's defenses and invest money there. So they hedge their bets, and that's what fucking investors do. They hedge their bets. They don't give a shit about who is on what side and what the policies are. They're about making money, purely about making money. It does not matter if Donald Trump is the president or Mickey Mouse is the president, as long as somehow they can control the economy. See, they don't care about politics. They care about the economy, and they are heavily invested and control the outcome of our economies globally, the global economy.
Globally. Lori, let me answer that as well. The question about, do they care about democracy? Well, no, because they're going to make their money whether Joe Biden wins and he saves democracy, or Donald Trump comes and takes over and becomes a dictator. They're gonna make their money regardless, because everything they make their money from will never stop. So the money just keeps on flowing. Hell, they might make more if Trump becomes president and it becomes a dictatorship. Who knows?
Remember what started, the whole inflation rise?
Keep it going. I'll be right back.
If you remember, what started the inflation rise was the supply problem, right? After COVID, which had slowed down the ability to create supplies, and people were laid off, so timber wasn't really being able to be harvested, and then all of a sudden you had this whole backup in California with the shipping, and you don't have the truckers needed to do the shipping. Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street controls all of that. Okay, so they can control the supply chain in any country they want. And so causing inflation for them is a good thing. because they're heavily invested again in all the things, the whole idea of supply chain, supply and demand. They can meet the demand and pull back the supply so that the demand rises, which drives prices up. And this is the kind of shit that they do. They control all of that stuff. And we're like completely oblivious to this shit. I had no fucking idea how deep this shit was. You want to talk about deep state? This is the deep state. This is the cabal. These three organizations control all the top 500 companies in the globe. You know, and I was surprised because I'm like thinking, holy shit, you know, okay, these three investment programs. Well, what about Microsoft? Where do they stand? What about Walmart? What about Amazon? What about this? They're all doing great. They're all fucking mega rich, but they're all owned by these three bigs in terms of stock. They own the stock in these companies.
What a dark show we're actually having. Great topics, but it's like a dark show because
scary.
And a lot of it's a money show too, because we close the show with this topic the coach gives us. Three great ones, coach. Great ones, coach. Philanthropy. Selfless or selfish? A look at the pros and cons. Now, philanthropy. So when you think of philanthropy, first of all, you think about somebody or somebody's with a lot of fucking money, okay? That's the first thing, you know, because being a philanthropist involves you giving, volunteering, helping others. Of course, it also helps you develop a new perspective on the world and different things, you know, it makes you hotty-toddy. But please don't tell me, and I can't wait for the pros and cons, there's a lot of dark shit going on through philanthropy as well, because remember, this is wealthy people. And a lot of these wealthy people, if you're wealthy, think about it. You got 10 trillion fucking dollars. What? I mean, unless you're just a person, you know, which you should be, by the way, full of empathy, sympathy, passion, concern for your fellow man. Now, great. But one of the things that comes with being so fucking rich is you don't give a fuck about anybody else. You got all the money. You control everything around you. And in philanthropy, coach, a lot of money involved there too. But what do you mean by look at the pros and cons?
Well, the pros and cons are about this, right? So you have some people. Recently we saw, and I wish I remembered her name, but she endowed a university with $1 billion, right? And the endowment was that therefore medical students could go to the university for free, and they would never be charged for their pursuit of their higher education. That's a pro, okay? You have other billionaires throughout history. I mean, going back even to the 1800s, when you're looking at Carnegie, right? Carnegie, he built America's library systems, okay? He invested all of his money into, when he was dying, he invested all of his money into philanthropy, and he gave away, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. And one of the big things was art, culture, libraries, those kinds of things. And that's why we have Carnegie Hall, for example. You know, this is where it came from. So he set a trend amongst the mega rich, and a lot of mega rich people throughout the late 1800s into the 1900s, they were doing these kind of altruistic acts with their money. But now you have the fucking mega rich nowadays. Bezos from Amazon is a great example, right? This is one of those cons, okay? And I mean con, like not just, you know, a negative thing, but like this is a fucking con, okay? He gave $100 million, okay, into this nonprofit organization, okay? $100 million, okay? Sounds like a lot of money. Certainly to you and I, that's a lot of money. Wow, you invested $100 million.
Yeah.
You know, do you know it takes that guy less than a fucking week to make $100 million of his own money, not like his company raised $100 million. $100 million in value to him is a week's worth of work. So really, did he do anything? No. And here's the thing that you find out when you look into this philanthropy by these mega rich people nowadays is that they're not only doing it for tax reasons, which is probably their primary reason to invest money in these things, but they are conspiring against raising taxes to pay for what they're calling entitlements. They don't want Social Security to be taxed on the people above the $150,000 income range. Okay? They don't want that kind of level of intervention. They certainly don't want a minimum corporate tax. They don't want these things that are going to help fund other types of programs like the food stamp program and all of these programs that are meant to benefit society. They want no involvement in that. So they think about, if I just throw a little bit of money here and make it look like I'm trying to do something, Microsoft try to do something, Walmart, Google, all these companies that throw money at these philanthropy investments. It is not a philanthropy investment. It is a stay out of problem investment. They're trying to keep the problems in the government from changing the rules on them because they enjoy the rules that exist right now and benefit tremendously. So for Microsoft to spend $1 billion on vaccine discoveries and stuff like that, that's nothing. That is nothing. They make $180 billion a year and they spend $1 billion over the life of their corporation. It's a joke. And that's where we're at right now. They look at it as tax breaks, but they're also trying to keep politicians and the public from believing that, we're doing good and there's no reason to worry about society.
So we should just think that the philanthropists are evil at heart.
Nowadays, ones, yeah. Not all of them. There are some that are. Here's the difference, right, Lori? Okay, Jeff Bezos worth almost $1 trillion. Okay, he gave away $100 million. That's nothing. This other woman that I spoke about, that she had $1 billion and gave the $1 billion to the university. That is true altruism. That is true philanthropy. That is from the heart trying to better society. And those people do exist, but they're the minority of the wealthy that are doing those things. The majority of the wealthy are looking for tax breaks and to dodge social economic questions.
They got something called a plutocratic bias when it comes to philanthropy. And understand that with philanthropy, and we're talking about the dark sides, this is where we've been throughout the show, but this represents a means of bypassing representative democracy so that public opinion and public policy can be shaped. Those are one of the dark things that comes out of philanthropy. I mean, again, when it involves money, when it involves the powerful, what do you expect? All the amounts of money involved in it. I mean, imagine the effect that it has had on democracy for so long.
Yeah, you know what's something that's interesting to me when we're talking about this, and we're saying, okay, these three corporations or investment firms are controlling all the Fortune 500 companies, but yet these Fortune 500 companies have thousands of lobbyists that they're paying big bucks to. It seems like the lobbyists then are like the middleman. Why are the corporations, like pharmaceuticals, for example, why are they having lobbyists in Washington, D.C.? Why not just go to BlackRock or Vanguard or State Street and just say, hey, listen, take care of this problem?
Well, again, and that's a great question, Lori. The idea, again, is that these investment firms, okay, they have CEOs, okay, and they have board of directors, okay, but they are managers of other people's money, okay? When you're talking about some company like, Google has lobbyists, right? so-and-so has lobbyists. Those are paid by the corporation itself, because those are the foot soldiers, okay, that go on to help develop policy, okay? Vanguard, BlackRock, and all those, they're like, I describe it like a pyramid scheme, right? So you have those three at the top of the pyramid, and then below that you have the Fortune 500 companies, okay? And then below that you have the lobbyists, and below that you have the politicians, and ultimately the three at the top have what they call a plausible denial. Like I said, BlackRock will deny that they are actually buying up private family homes, but they're investing in companies that are buying up private family homes. So it's kind of like that plausible denial. You know, I'm glad you brought up lobbyists, because this kind of swings it back a little bit back to Trump and the Dossier, right? And with Russia. That was the biggest problem with the organization he had put together in his campaign in 2016, is that he hired all these lobbyists that worked either with Russia directly or with pro-Russian president in legislature in Ukraine. And so we already kind of know that the whole agenda that came forward with the help from Russia was based on the relationships that all these people, Paul Manafort, Carter Page, Rick Gates, Michael Flynn, even Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen's an interesting fuck, right? Like, this is a guy that, first of all, his wife is Russian, okay? So there's really some weird stuff in there. And the Dossier talks about the wife of somebody coming over to negotiate stuff, the wife of somebody, right? Michael Cohen's father-in-law, or father rather, was a developer in Russia. He was a real estate developer, right? And they were trying to work a real estate deal for Donald Trump in Moscow for the Moscow Towers. So when you have this, you know, this stuff going on a political level, it's very different than the economic agenda that these main three have.
Right. That's right.
The political stuff is down at the bottom. That's the messy stuff that other people have to worry about, right? You're talking about, you know, and go ahead. Were you saying something, Lori?
No, I didn't say anything.
I thought I heard something. Is your dog barking in the background?
No.
So what I discovered, I'm just going to run on a rant with this Steele Dossier, right? Because it's really interesting. My wife just came in before we started the show and is like, "You're not going to believe this." Michael Steele, okay, and Michael Steele is a commentator on MSNBC. He used to be the head of the RNC back in the day.
Yep.
He's like, "Oh, he's talking about the Steele Dossier right now," and I'm like, really? That's fucking wild, because who the fuck would be talking about it besides me? Like, it just struck me, you know, last week that this is something I want to read, because I'm like, you know what? I hear all this shit about the Steele Dossier, but personally, I hadn't read it, you know, and I read the Mueller report. I did all this stuff. So I decided to read the Steele Dossier, and it's really interesting. And that's where that retrospective in our title came, because in the beginning, it was, you know, totally discredited in the media, which is not true. It wasn't discredited. Okay. The problem people had with the Dossier was, first of all, the sexual, you know, accusations with Donald Trump in Moscow, and they have, you know, videotapes of him and stuff like that. Well, the story is, the true story of that is that they have a document, they have a video rather of him. They've been working on a dossier for many years with Donald Trump to get the goods on him. And what he did is he paid prostitutes to come to his hotel room and urinate on each other. They weren't urinating on him. He wasn't involved in the act at all. He just paid to watch it, you know, kind of like, you know, pay-per-view. And so that was in the Dossier. Now, that's really one of the things that the whole organization called Fusion GPS, they were kind of like, let's not put that in. It's really kind of slanderous. We don't have the video, you know, but Christopher Steele said, we're going to put it in, you know, I'm going to put it in the Dossier anyways. And he did. But the two things, like, I'm like, how is this discredited? Just because of that? Like, yeah, it's slanderous. Yeah, you don't have proof, whatever. It's funny when you do the research. There's only two fucking items that the regular media complained about to discredit this fucking brief, right? The first one was that he spelled Alpha Group wrong. Okay, so in his spelling, it was ALPHA. Okay, and in the real group, it's ALFA. And I'm thinking, that's kind of like, that doesn't really fucking discredit it, you know?
Right.
And then the other thing was he claimed that this town in Russia was meant for just the elite Russian officials and Putin and stuff like that. And they said that's not true. It's not reserved for just those people. But when you look at this town in Russia, it's where the spa, the sanatorium, they call it a spa, where the Russian president goes to get his release. But it's also owned only by oligarchs. Okay. And if you don't understand what an oligarch is, it's somebody who controls the fucking government because they're rich. So it's like these are the two things that they claimed were massive errors in this report. So when I learned that, I said, fuck this. I got to look deeper into this stuff. And it's like the two claims that come out of this dossier that are so relevant is Russia was looking for basically for Trump to do two things, to three things: destabilize NATO, okay, to mind their business about Ukraine, okay, and to cause cultural divide in America, okay. And so those were the three things that they set forward in their agreement. And Carter Page was like the main guy going back and forth to Russia with these negotiations. He went there dozens of times, documented on the Steele dossier. And then what happened was Russia started looking at who Trump had in the campaign, right? So they see Paul Manafort, okay? They see Michael Flynn. They see all these people, the Rick Gates, and they actually got concerned that this was too explosive to help Donald Trump, because what they were offering Donald Trump in return for these things was basically the opposition research on Hillary Clinton's campaign. Hillary Clinton, they had a dossier going back before her husband was president, and they have all kinds of shit on her. Nothing as slanderous as what they have on Trump, but they have different policy things. They recorded her hotel rooms, and they bugged all the rooms that she's been in and shit like that in Europe. So they had all this shit on that. And they were feeding Donald Trump's campaign all this stuff. And in return, Donald Trump was to do these parroting programs like, we're against NATO. And he did it. He literally went out and said, we're going to defund NATO. We don't need it. It's obsolete. If they don't pay enough, I don't care if Russia invades them. He did all this fucking talk, okay? Because what happened was, at one point, Putin assessed that Donald Trump was mentally unstable, and they were going to pull all their help from Donald Trump before the election, okay? So they told Carter Page that they were going to end their relationship, and and Donald Trump started doing exactly what they wanted publicly. And so what did they do in return? They dumped the DNC emails for him through WikiLeaks. Okay.
Remember that?
That was payment for him talking shit about NATO, right? That was great. Then he stirred up the crowd and started to separate this is the right and this is the left, and we got to get rid of these fucking people and all this stuff. And he really riled up the crazy MAGA, right? Well, what did they do for return for that? They released Clinton's emails to the fucking FBI. That's how Comey came by the fucking emails, that he came running out and said, we got her emails. Yeah, fucking Russia gave them to him after Trump said, okay, Russia, you gotta help me release the emails. Why? Because he already stoked exactly what they wanted.
Already knew.
In America. The Russian plan was for Donald Trump to cause so much fucking havoc, and for the misinformation program through Russia to force Clinton and Bernie Sanders, is actually even mentioned in the Steele dossier, to force their voters to go and support Donald Trump as an anti-establishment, drain the swamp. That's the whole shit there. Well, the whole time Russia was fucking guiding him and basically telling him what he needed to do in order to maintain favor. But they got so nervous, they pulled all their ambassadors out of America and actually replaced them with ambassadors that had nothing to do with the arrangements going on. They forced the resignation of Paul Manafort and Carter Page. They all had to resign from the campaign. And Michael Cohen actually ended up stepping in, and this is where his involvement comes in. He ended up stepping in and going to Prague. Okay, he was supposed to go to Moscow, but they said that's too dangerous. He went to the Czech Republic in Prague and met with the Russian officials there to basically try to like soften the blow of it coming out that Paul Manafort worked with the pro-Russian president, that Carter Page was actually involved in fucking oil and gas industry in Russia. All these attachments. And these people went to fucking jail or were charged with lobbying for foreign nations based on their relationship with Russia and with the pro-Russian president in Ukraine. And it's like,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Lori.
No, I was going to say, and this is how I kind of link this to what's going on now with Trump running as president again, election, is that he doesn't have all those people, but he's got Erdogan, who he brings in, who is, Hungary's part of NATO, but Erdogan is also friendly with Putin. So he can maintain his country as, they're fighting the Ukraine war, but let's get Trump back and we'll start that as talking points that he's not going to fund anything for NATO. Let them pay however he put it, let them pay their money for, the NATO allies, right? And then be told that he's not going to give a penny towards Ukraine. So Trump is playing to Putin again.
Yes.
So we need another Steele dossier.
And that's why I say it's interesting that my wife came in the room and said that she just heard on MSNBC them talking about the Steele dossier, because I'm like, why isn't anybody talking about this? Now, you guys know it's been at least a week that I started this topic and was doing the research and stuff like that. And so it's really interesting that it's now coming out on mainstream media. And this guy, Michael Steele, he has a program on Sunday morning. So I'm suspecting that his discussion tonight was a segue to what he's going to talk about on his Sunday program. And it is one of those things that like wake up, okay? But here's the thing, Laura, you mentioned about he doesn't have all these people anymore, and he doesn't need them. And here's why. I'll give you a great example, okay? When I met I guess I'll say a heavyweight boxer. I don't want to drop names. I met a heavyweight boxer through a friend of mine, okay? And me and the boxer became friends. Now, he was an actual champion, held the belt, okay? And therefore, I didn't need to like go see him with my friend anymore. You know what I mean? Like, he was cut out of the picture, though he was still friends over here on the side, still doing stuff on the side. But I had a direct access now to this heavyweight champ. And so it's kind of like what happened with Trump. He doesn't need all these people that set up these arrangements, that develop these relationships because they had existing relationships already. He doesn't need all of those anymore. He's got a direct relationship now with all these dictators that these people put him in touch with. So he doesn't need this campaign organization anymore. He can pick up the fucking phone and call fucking Putin and tell him, come to the thing and let's have a golden shower with each other. And that's how personal their relationships are now. So, yeah, originally he needed that campaign organization, but nowadays he has direct relationships now. He doesn't need anybody else.
I think he become more powerful than he even imagined he would become. Because I can't imagine who saw this coming. Lori, about that time of the show, I ask you final thoughts.
It's very scary. Unfortunately, I missed part of the conversation because my neighbor had his lawnmower going and it caused me to drop out of the show. But you brought up Reagan and Vanguard, and I was an investor in money market in Vanguard in the 1980s because I was getting 13, 14, 15% from them. So I could see where it would kind of be growing. But this begs for me to have looked at, as I had stated earlier, in the Citizens United. And I think that might be something we might want to consider looking at too down the road.
Let's keep that in mind, Coach. Final thoughts.
Well, I'll build on what she was saying with Citizens United. First of all, that's an organization that sued the FEC or FCE, And it had to do with the dark money aspect of things, and the idea that you can invest money for political reasons for freedom of speech aspect, that an organization has as much right to freedom of speech and advocacy and special interest as an individual does. And that's really what came about with the Supreme Court ruling, was that the organizations and corporations and all that have a right to invest in political action committees and into dark money nonprofit organizations and stuff like that. So that's really the Citizens United. It gets deeper and it's worth looking further into, but that's the gel of what that Citizens United lawsuit was that went to the Supreme Court.
My final thoughts revolve around the show. You think about what we talked about here tonight. Money, the influence of money that holds for the dossier, the dark money section, the philanthropy section we talked about, the control that money has. And people have often wondered, we've said it, we've heard people say it, man, how rich do you have to be? How much money do you want? I mean, you got all this money. You think about the rich, the filthy rich, they never have enough. They'll never spend it. They'll never be able to spend it. Their families will never be able to spend it. But it's never enough. And when you combine that with power and where we are today, the discourse running through this country, I mean, when you think of something simple, for those people who support Donald Trump, if Joe Biden was charged, just put Biden in Trump's place, change nothing, just flip Biden instead of Trump, those same people will be losing their fucking minds. And so we do this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while we're doing this, companies like Vanguard, Blackstone, State, and all of these people, all the elites, they continue to do what they're doing. And this is where we are. This was a great show because it was different than what we normally do. So Coach, shout out to you for this great agenda, because it really, really, it really made me sit here and think about the shit we talked about and imagine the minds of these people. This is a plan. This is something that started years and years ago. These people have to look ahead to all of this. You got to project the market, project the, this and know this and what's the oil, how's the stock, all of this, so that you can continue to do what you're doing to get to your ultimate goal. Now, what the fuck is that ultimate goal? Like, you want all the fucking money in the world? You want all the control in the world? You want to tell me what time I can piss, take a shit, have a cup of coffee? So what is it? Because I want to finish with this. When people talk about Trump and a Trump presidency, or what it's going to look like, yeah, it's going to be filled with anger and all kinds of shit. But how is it going to affect? How is it really going to affect regular people? Not really. It's not really going to change a damn thing. It's not really going to change. But look at what we go through. Look at how much money has been spent. How much money is spent on political campaigns while our country is so fucked up with homelessness and all this shit that we can use that money for. There's always a better place for it, according to them. This is Attack on the Politicos. It is the NGSC Sports Weekly Political Show for Laurie and the Coach. Thank you for joining us. Had a pretty full house this evening from Twitter. I'll never call it X, so thank you all for joining us from there. We'll be back next week. There's plenty to talk about here. We're waiting to see what comes down, with Trump, these court cases. Just fuck them. Let's decide it. Let's decide it at the ballot box. Let's decide it at the ballot. That's the way you want it. Let's decide it at the ballot box. But anyway, join us next week. We'll be back for more. Remember the website, it is ngscsports.com, where you catch all of your current content. Remember, it is NGSC Sports, where we never stop. You guys have a good night. I'll see you Sunday on In the Batter's Box.